How many people truly read because they enjoy it, and how many do so because they feel they ought to be seen as intelligent? Hi, I'm Iri, and I'm going to read you something that I wrote last week. And I tried to memorize it, but I'm not too good about that. So I'm going to read you. There is a phrase that it says most of us would love to have already read, rather than having to read now. And that is a simple phrase. It says a great deal about the times we live in. But we belong to a generation where knowledge is consumed in increasingly shorter formats, like for example 30 seconds videos, quick posts, and obviously content designed to hold our attention for only a few seconds. In this context, reading books has become almost unusual. Yet still many people aspire to. For some, it has even turned into a kind of cultural symbol, where culture itself becomes a commodity. Nowadays, reading often represents more than, obviously, knowledge. It can represent identity. Having a bookshelf in the background of a video call, quoting famous authors, or even just recommending complex books can create an identity and can create an image of you. But obviously there is not maybe bad intentions behind that, because that is a very natural human desire to belong to a certain social circle, to a certain status. And that is not bad. I don't think that is bad. Maybe, in some situations. Reading has become, in some spaces, a kind of cultural credential. And that raises an interesting question, that it is, how many people truly read because they enjoy it, and how many do so because they feel they ought to be seen as intelligent, for example. It's not uncommon to see, for example, content creators surrounded by books and obviously constantly mentioning famous authors or just making literary references. And while many of them actually do read, they generally do read, there are others that follow the tendency to use books as a way of projecting a particular image, as though appearing cultured matters more than, yet regardless of how it is perceived socially, reading remains one of the most powerful things that human beings possess. And not because it ultimately makes you more intelligent. It is because it forces you to slow down for a second. And while social media trains you to obviously absorb a lot of information in only a few seconds in one day, reading demands concentration, imaginations, and obviously time. And obviously it asks me obviously to slow down for a second and to stay with the same idea for several pages, to follow a line of reasoning and build meaning for ourselves. In much of the same way that Sudoku, crosswords, or mathematics help train certain cognitive abilities, reading develops others than those activities don't. And those are, for example, comprehension, memory, imagination, and reflection. But there is something more that makes reading very important and special, obviously. And that is that books allow us to inhabit new minds and obviously enter to new worlds that we have never been before and we have never imagined. When we read a novel, we are not just simply following a story. We step into somebody else's mind. to somebody else's way of thinking, and we might never encounter that before. There are some examples. Take, for example, I don't know, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, that we follow a protagonist who commits a murder and he spirals into a profound psychological crisis. The interest of the novel lies not only in the crime itself, but in its exploration of guilt, anxiety, and the contradictions of human nature. I can give you other examples. There is, for example, The Stranger by Albert Camus, where the protagonist seems emotionally detached from the world, forcing us to question many of our assumptions about morality, society, and the meaning of experience, of existence. And we can say a more recent work that is such as The Vegetarian by Han Kang, that explore inner conflicts and emotions that are difficult to express in everyday language. That's why sometimes I think that reading is more than just reading, because in some way reading is a way of studying psychology without even realizing it. We place ourselves in situations that we have never been through, and we understand emotions we have never felt. We explore decisions we would never make by ourselves, obviously. And that expands our ability to understand others and to understand other decisions and other people. Reading is not only transmit information, it also transmits human experience. Since their origins, books have carried humans, literally. It allows storage, knowledge, philosophical ideas, scientific discoveries, and cultural traditions to be perceived. Much of what we know about humanity today exists because of what we know about humanity today. Because someone chose to write it, and someone chose to read it. And that's true, because we know a lot about humanity because we read about it. And not only talking about humanity, we read about, for example, fashion, we read about a lot of topics, not necessarily about humanity as it is. Of course, internet has changed the rules, because now we can get information as quickly as possible and learn almost everything within seconds. We have instant access to information that only in a few decades ago would have required hours and hours of searching through libraries. But speed doesn't always equal deep. A 30 seconds video can teach you a fact. Yes, it can. But obviously, social media is good for discovering that information, but as it appears, no. Social media is good for discovering information, but that information appears as quickly it disappears due to the consume content constantly, yet retain very little of it. And that's true, because when you're scrolling on TikTok, you don't remember the first video that you have watched. You don't remember it. Reading works differently, and we know that, because it's obviously, you don't maybe remember the first page, but you remember what you were reading and what it was about. Reading works differently because we spend several pages with the same idea and developing that idea. We create deeper connections, and it teaches you a way of thinking. We reflect on what we are reading and go back if sometimes it's not very clear. You can go back, and that's very good, because yeah, you can do the same thing with TikTok, but obviously watching TikTok is not as deeper as reading. I think I said that wrong, but anyway. And I do not believe that reading is like the best thing, obviously. I don't think that, but I believe that reading remains one of the few activities that allow us to escape from immediacy, and perhaps that is precisely why it remains valuable, because it is not simply accumulating information. It is about learning how you think and to obviously understand others' experience through books. I hope people can understand what I'm saying. Well, that's all that I want to say. This is my first video on social media, and I know my English is so shitty, but thank you for watching, and I guess I'm going to upload more, I think.